I always like to take a moment just to feel into the presence of this sanctuary and to you. And joining us online, thank you. Thank you for being here. So we've built up for several weeks through Holy Week. And oftentimes there's kind of a Easter, then we go back to whatever we were doing, right? You know how that buildup is? My brother used to be really about the buildup for certain holidays. And he would build up for Christmas, and then all of a sudden, my brother was special needs. So we navigated life near the same growing emotional age for a period of time, and then I became the big brother. He was the big brother, and then I became the big brother. And of course, to 26th of December, he was automatically like, I've got time to be nice again. So the naughty thing would start all over again. So. And I know we do that with holidays, don't we? We build up to them. There's so much build up for it, and we have this rising up. But the Easter story doesn't end there. Everything about the narratives were about building up to this certain point, but there's more to the story if we continue to look at that as our own narrative. Fear, as you heard in Return to Love, fear often shrinks us back or calls us to withdraw from something. Every single one of us know what that feels like, where we have been apprehensive about something to step forward, and yet we're stirring, we're called, we know it, but for whatever reason we take a few steps back. We may shrink our voice, we may withdraw for something for a period of time. But the thing about fear is it's an amazing opportunity. Because in unity, we always say, we are love, God is love, we are expressions of God, and God is love, and we come from love. Yes? Do I have agreement on that? So if everything comes from love, where does fear fit in? Doesn't fear also come from love? Would you kind of go, I don't know about that one. See, I see some furrowing brows, like, how's that possible? The other day, I wanted to give you a visual description. So my office is about 3 city blocks, so it's a walk from the house. It's separated. It's about 1.5 acres of property. So Sophie, who some of you met on screen last month or so, my dog, Sophie Grace. So when I get ready to, if she's watching right now, she's going to hear this and just perk up. If I say, are you ready to go to work? She is ears up. She's at the door. She's like, yeah, let's go. Because she's not going to make the straight line for the office. She's going to do the round. She's going to run about 1.5 acres and then meet me there. And so in my office, there's also a window in the door. So usually sometime during the day, I feel like it's time for lunch or I want to take a break from whatever I'm working on. And I open up the door, and so she's ready to take us home, of course, doing her round. This particular day, just a few weeks ago, I went to the door and I looked out the door, and right out off the porch was a snake. Not the little garden ones that I've seen before. This is not a fishing story, by the way. About 3 foot stretched out and a good diameter, like a big heavy mag light, fat flashlight. So pretty huge right out the door. And so I saw it immediately. I shut the door, pushed Sophie back, and I stood there. So fear grabbed me there for a moment. And then I had time to look, watch, and see, oh, I know this type of snake. This snake is non-venomous. It's no harm. However, Sophie the hunter would have jumped in really, really quickly. And in defense, the snake would have defended itself. And there would have probably been some hurt, probably on both parties. But going to the vet and maybe a bite or an infection, do we really want to do all that? So my quick action of fear stopped, and I rescued the situation there for a moment. Reassessed, went on about our business. This reminded me of a story, and some of you might have heard this before, where there was a father working in his front yard, and the house was built on a hill. Quite a bit of a slope towards a pretty busy intersection. And he was working in the flower beds. And he had the toddler, you know, at that age to where all of a sudden they get away from you, they're gone. And the little boy was toddling around, and he looked away for a moment, as we can, and we know how fast they are. And he was making it really fast towards that curb in that busy intersection. And he leapt in fear and rushed and grabbed the little boy right on the edge of the curb and pulled him back. In that moment, he was scared to death. Fear jumped in. Where did both of those situations come from, though? Love. Influenced by love. And I know our stories we can look at fear as something we don't want to have, and yet everything about it can also bring us and rescue us from the next moment. Freeze, fight, flight, those responses come up for us. I would tend to be the kind of person that would shrink back, that I would freeze maybe in a situation. But here's the thing about fear. We don't want to get stuck in a cycle of fear. So for instance, if I would never take Sophie to the office again because there's always a snake. That story, you see how we can get stuck in a story? Or the little boy and the father says, no more gardening, no more flower beds, no more working in the front yard ever until my son grows up and becomes an adult. We can get stuck in those places of fear. So fear is there perhaps to rescue a situation for a moment, but we don't want to live there. We don't want to build our house or set up our tent there to live. But we need to move to an open-hearted place of survival instinct into that open door, that open space to step out and live courageously. So I go back to the narrative of the disciples. So here in this journey, in this story, Last Supper, crucifixion, resurrection, all of the stories, they hid in this story, if you recall some of that, in the upper room. They trembled in fear, if you read the story. Because here they are following someone, being a part of a belief system, being part of a movement, really. And all of a sudden, all of these things occurred. And they began to question, locked and trembling in an upper room. What about me? What would happen to me? What did I believe in? What was I a part of? What did all that mean? Maybe doubt, fear, plagued with, what about the present? What if I step out? What is the future going to look like now? So fear rescued them for a moment. But there's a beautiful scripture piece that I want to share with you now. Luke and John describe Jesus' post-resurrection experiences to his followers, and they contain details. He appeared when the disciples were together, with the doors locked from fear of the same. Creating in this, if we look at it metaphysically, creating their own cell, their own prison. The panic and the worry that must have plagued them. If we could just go back and look at our own human narrative, how that narrative can inform us. When have we locked ourselves in the upper room and peered out, fearful of that next step? I know we can all say we've been there, we've done that, maybe many times. The rumors of the empty tomb were still spreading. Jesus appears in disguise after visiting and teaching, and he reveals himself in a beautiful scene. And it goes like this. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, he gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. And the scripture says, then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning while he was with us, when he walked with us, talked with us on the road? And weren't the scriptures opened to us? There's a deeper story in there of opening the door, opening a new awareness of, what did I just see? What was this story about? And I know if we move into this now moment, into our own life experiences, we can see how there's questions and doubts and fear that may rescue us. Have you ever identified with a group, a segment of society, a faith, a belief where there was great dislike, an aversion? Maybe the otherness showed up. It shows up in the world. We've all witnessed and we've learned what happens to, air quotes here, the others. When we get into us and them and separation, it creates a prison for every single person that participates in that. We may just not know about it. I don't know about you, but my story has said, shrink back, hide, don't draw attention to yourself. Survival instinct creeps in. It's there for a purpose. Everything's there for a divine purpose. Fight, flight, freeze. It shouts to me, though, shrink back, become quiet, withdraw, hide. And yet for some, hear this with me, it's an impossibility to hide. For some, simply the pigment of their skin, the language in which they speak, the accent in which they may speak and share. It could be their gender, their orientation, reveals an aspect, a part of them, but there's no hiding. I had the privilege of growing up in a world and a society, the privilege of being able to hide parts of me. But you know what comes with that? The burden, the weight of knowing that. Are you seeing how the disciples' story in the upper room and hiding out can also be our own story of how, when and how have I hidden out from that divine call, as we heard in Return to Love, that is ours to shine because it does liberate others when we can say, here I am in my full divine Christ self, and celebrate that. Each one of us. To lock ourselves in an upper room is to hide. Growing up, I also knew something was different about myself. I couldn't understand it necessarily, but I knew it was there. But what I saw was the models and the teachers and the world around, the bubble of this little boy growing up to a young man and to, teenager. The world around me did not have an example or someone to share what it looks like. And I got to tell you, God bless Google, but we got to go back in time. There's no Google or resources to go and figure this out. And I believe therein lies the miracle of the ancients, those that came before us. Because the resources to find was going within, right here. The mighty wisdom teacher. We are all, I just got to kick off this week at Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute. Spring term just started. So my class, this is 5 years later, I've been teaching this, and it's called Discerning Your Purpose. And so those students are diving into this question, why am I here? My purpose, right now, on the planet. As I live and breathe, what's my purpose? And what's so beautiful, and what I remind them that I'll remind you today, we are all wisdom teachers, and we are all truth students. Always. The kingdom within, or that divine wisdom within, is right here. And yes, Google's a nice resource to go look up something, go find out something, go get another resource. And we have more teachers and models today to teach us all different ways in which we can move forward in the world. But I got to tell you, that divine answer is within when we open the door and we fully reveal it and say, yes, my highest self is always giving me the answers. I knew growing up for myself that miracle of really being able to go within and say, oh wow, I do have an answer. I do know. But it took a time till I could start sharing it with others. My compassion began to expand. I think that's what happens often. And while sometimes I know fear rescues us, it can sometimes leave us stuck. So I would invite you, if there's those stuck places where I'm thinking about this next step or that next step, and for whatever reason you have shrunk back or stepped back again and again, and you look back in retrospect and you say, why is that? Scripture again reveals safety versus risk, kind of a scripture here. It says in 1 John 4:18, I love this part. Such love, the highest self, so the highest Christ love, such a love to know as that, has no fear. And I say, what? Why? Tell me more. Because perfect love expels all fear. If we are afraid, it is for fear of punishment. And it shows that we have not fully experienced, Scripture says, His love, and I would say His or the divine perfect love, the highest degree of Christ's love. That's what we are attaining. That's what we are moving forward to know that. Because it's true, if we decide we're stepping away from something and not towards something, fear of punishment could be self-sabotaging beliefs, places of being stuck. That is punishment. That is ways that we shrink back. Growing up and continuing to evolve and explore this, my observer skills begin to rise as a young boy. And I remember observing people having conversations, and yet I knew there was more to the story in the conversations by the eye movements or things that were not being said. And this is where I think we can all tap into the practice of empathy, the practice of knowing more in the conversation that's really palpable. And it is a practice. It's a practice to continue tapping into that intuitive nature. The wisdom that we all seek, the answers are within us. Tap in and know. How many days, how many years, how many months or weeks will we keep the door closed and not unlock the door and open the door to our fullest potential? When all the rules may say, no way, not you, not yours. The universe, if that's your language, or God, always has a different plan. So trust. Lean into it and trust. The courage to open that door, I know, is a powerful door. Courage to step forward and say, here I am. This is me. This is my truth, and I want to claim it right now. Powerful. And it doesn't come without great strength and powerful vulnerability. And one of my teachers, Brene Brown, if you're a Brene Brown fan, is all about the power of vulnerability. And she says through her research that vulnerability is our most accurate way to measure courage. Yet I think for decades we've thought we've got to step out in courage, but you can't without vulnerability. You've got to be able to step forward and say, hello world, this is me. Does that feel powerful to you? Does that feel good to you? Does it feel scary to you? I'm looking for some this or some thises. Where are you? Where is that key to do this, to unlock that door? That key lives in one place. And Jesus, again, through the narrative, gave us that example. Forgiveness is the key. So the door might be locked, and we maybe want to push it open. We may find a window to go around, but to unlock that door fully, wide open, there's a key of forgiveness. In Jesus' example, what was the first thing he did before he shared the most powerful testimony that could be shared? He forgave. Jesus' first example of sharing peace, he forgave those who slept or fled or rebuked him and turned away in his greatest time of need. That was his first thing. He forgave. That's powerful. It takes a lot of work. Because blame will keep us in a conscious cycle. We'll just keep going around and around in the blame game. And the one who was killed but would not know death. Isn't that an interesting statement? The one who was killed would not know death. If we look into our metaphysical interpretations of death, we might see it literally as an end. But death is represented as a crippling fear, a denial of our infinite possibility. How do you like that definition for death? Denying oneself of our infinite possibility. Jesus' second blessing was when we get to the good stuff. He gave us the great message. Love one another. So if you take anything away from today, if you're watching this at a later time, love one another. If I enter everything that I do into love one another, and I start removing the us and them, the otherness, and love one another the way I would want to be loved. Wow. Pretty powerful, isn't it? Would you say with me, love one another together?
Love one another.
You said that before, I'm sure. There's a Sunday school class at some point in your life where they said, everyone, love one another. And the kids will go, love one another. It's powerful. Kids get it. The little ones get it. They get really excited about that one. Love one another. The journey didn't end with Easter. Let's remember that journey continues because we know the disciples unlocked the door. They came out because here it is over 2,000 years later and we're still talking about it, right? A movement did spread. It did happen. It did occur. So I invite you when you're ready, and that's an internal quest, to open that door and set your light free so that all can be liberated. Shine your beautiful light. And wherever you are, online, joining us later, right now in the sanctuary, always know here at Unity on Greenville, from my heart to yours, you matter. You are sacred. And you are loved. You've heard it today. You are loved. God bless you. Thank you for allowing me to serve.